Okay, I hope you are seeing my slide and in full PPT. If not, please raise your hand. So today's lecture title is that oxygen limitations and denitrification of the Arabian Sea. So this is the part we haven't considered so far. In the first lecture, we introduced the basic primary production of the Arabian Sea. We separated them into three categories: coastal upwelling, related primary production, and the deep convective mixing induced primary production in the northern Arabian Sea, and the subsurface primary production, which is happening throughout the year in the subsurface chlorophyll maxima region. And then we introduced the basic concepts of nutrient structure in the Arabian Sea, and also we introduced the basic carbon cycle in the Arabian Sea, right? The structure of the carbonaceous tracers and air sea fluxes and PCO2 as an introductory lecture. Then we also introduced the basic carbonate chemistry in and abiotic pump and so biotic pump solubility and biological pump, etc. We have introduced in the first lecture. In the second lecture, we focused more on the nutrient limitation conditions in the Arabian Sea. What are the major limiting nutrients? So for limiting nutrients, we considered micronutrients and macronutrients. We introduced some theories about fundamental theory about them, and after that we looked at some structures of the macro and micronutrients in the Arabian Sea. Then we introduced the concept of iron. We introduced the concept of silica, for example. Then we employed a simple ecosystem model to study the major nutrient limiting condition in terms of total nitrogen and silicate. So we found that the Arabian Sea is mostly limited by, in the surface is limited by nitrogen, and also equally by silicate, but more on nitrogen limitation in, especially in the April May June season, or March April May season. And then if you come to the subsurface, however, silicate is a major limiter in the near the subsurface chlorophyll maxima because of the deep silicic line compared to the nutric line. So due to that reason, silicate offer a major um, limiter. Also, we looked at the prey-predatory relation between primary and secondary producers, how the plankton community itself are interacted across due to the various limiting condition, limiting stress we introduce in the ocean. We found that if you limit the condition, that I mean, if you don't limit the silicate, what will happen is the diatom grows tremendously, which at the expense of reducing the flagellates, which will affect the zooplankton which is surviving on flagellates. So this relation between the various prey predatory community in the Arabian Sea is very much depends upon how the silicate is regulating the primary productions, etc. We looked at in the lecture 2. Now today we will look into oxygen, and another important factor in biogeochemistry of Arabian Sea is the oxygen limitation and denitrification. They are actually interlinked. Whenever there is an oxygen limitation condition, there can be a possibility of denitrification. The reasons several times we explained in the past two lectures that when oxygen limits, the anaerobic bacterial respiration happens. Then what is that actually mean? The bacteria will now depend upon nitrate as an oxidant instead of oxygen. So nitrate will run out. So that's called denitrification. Okay, so oxygen limitation and denitrification of the Arabian Sea we will consider today. Now, going further, this is the first plot I show in all these three lectures, showing the chlorophyll concentration of the Arabian Sea in the August and January. I think you are now familiar with this picture because we are seeing this for last two classes. You see that larger primary production happens in the Western Arabian Sea and Northern Arabian Sea, etc., and with a more or less kind of arid condition in the surface chlorophyll in the Central Arabian Sea. But if in the subsurface you have sufficient subsurface chlorophyll maxima is found in the Arabian Sea, and various export of quantifications of Arabian Sea, for example, export production, biological pump, new production, etc., are quantified also shown in this panel. Now, let me throw this picture in front of you. What is this illustrating? The oxygen concentration at 200-meter depth in the ocean. So let us spend some time here to understand what is depicted here. So the oxygen concentration at 200-meter depth is what's shown here. This is from the World Ocean Atlas 2013. What do you understand from this picture? So if you look at the 200-meter depth, that is maybe at the base of the thermocline, basically, right? For the physical oceanographic point of view, at least in the tropics, when the mid-latitude thermocline can be much deeper than in the tropics. But if you look at the 200-meter depth, that maybe at the base of the euphotic zone or beneath, you can see that the oxygen concentration is extremely low in few pockets of the global oceans. And where are they? most notable one is the eastern equatorial tropical Pacific, where there is a the from the California coast and down, and also from the Peru coast and down here. In this part, you can see the large amount of low oxygenated water at 200-meter depth is located. Similarly, the next important pocket of low oxygen water is the Arabian Sea. So this plot itself tells you the Arabian Sea, or you can call it North Indian Ocean. North Indian Ocean is a very important zone in terms of biogeochemistry in the global oceans, because why? The very low oxygenated waters are located here at par with the low oxygenated water you see in the eastern tropical Pacific, and to some extent the eastern tropical Atlantic also has kind of low oxygenated water around 200-meter depth. And another notable portion is more on the North Pacific region, but they are not as severe as in the eastern tropical Pacific or in the North Indian Ocean. Now there is a question: why this is happening? Why these two pockets are identified oxygen minimum zone of the global ocean? So that's what we are going to discuss in today's lecturing. So now let us, before proceeding further, let us focus more on the North Indian Ocean, where the quantity of the oxygen, which is also coming as close as 10 micromole per kilogram, that is extremely low oxygen condition at a very shallow depth of 200-meter. 200-meter depth is at the beneath and beyond of the euphotic zone, where the particulate organic matter and which export downwards is attacked by bacteria. So bacteria has to respire on those based depending upon oxygen present in the water column. So this is happening throughout the global ocean, but at some pocket of the global ocean, if the consumption of oxygen is not replenished with the atmospheric input, where is the major supply of oxygen? It is the atmospheric input, because below the euphotic zone, the photosynthesis cannot replace any oxygen in there, right? So the atmospheric input has to replenish this oxygen in the below the euphotic zone. But atmosphere is far away from the bottom of the euphotic zone or thermocline. So where it can be replenished, wherever there are ventilation processes, the ocean water get exposed to the the surface, where the oxygen get dissolves in the water, and that water gets subducted and travels to the interior. That's how the oxygen get replenished. But in these pockets, say for example, in the eastern tropical Pacific, in the North Indian Ocean, etc., this phenomenon is not very efficient. The efficiency of replenishing the oxygen as compared to the demand of oxygen is relatively weaker, and because of that there are identified hotspot of very low oxygenated water in the North Indian Ocean. So which is very important and very unique in among the tropical ocean, and this is very important to understand how the oxygen limitation is offering as a serious condition in the biogeochemistry of the Arabian Sea and the Bay of Bengal, especially the North Indian Ocean. But today we'll more focus on the Arabian Sea, because our lecturing, our regional study is basically about Arabian Sea in these three lectures. So we'll focus more on the Arabian Sea. Now, before going further, let me introduce some basic concepts about the presence of oxygen in the deep ocean. So for that, I'm introducing a concept called preformed and remineralized components of oxygen cycle in the ocean. So what is preformed and remineralized? So there are two words we have to get familiar with. In most general form, we can think of the nutrient or oxygen concentration of a water parcel in the interior of the ocean as consisting of two components. Okay, the first is the preformed concentration called C preformed. So what is C preformed means? The component of nutrient or oxygen which is not yet undergone any biological formation is called a preformed nutrient or preformed oxygen. So the first is the preformed concentration, that is this water parcel had when it left the surface. So when the water parcel was at the surface, it is in constant equilibrium with the atmospheric oxygen. So it has some dissolved content of the oxygen, and that content of the oxygen is called the preformed oxygen. Now the second one is the change in concentration due to remineralization. So remineralization also can change the concentration, right? What is remineralization? The return of organic nutrient into inorganic form by bacterial respiration. So bacteria consume the oxygen. So therefore, oxygen concentration is to get modified in the interior of the ocean. So that the second one is the change in concentration of oxygen due to the remineralization that occurred since the time as a result of the remineralization. Okay, so this is the two concept of preformed and remineralized oxygen. So at any given time, so in order to study the impact of remineralization on the ocean interior distribution of oxygen, we would like to estimate its remineralized component, that is the change in oxygen that occurred since a water parcel was last in contact with the atmosphere. That means the observed concentration of oxygen must be a sum of the change in oxygen due to remineralization plus oxygen due to preformed. That means that when it was in contact with the atmosphere last, just before its subduction. Okay. So, in other way of saying that the change in oxygen due to remineralization definitely must be equal to observed concentration of oxygen minus preformed concentration of the oxygen. Okay. So now you may call it another way as apparent oxygen utilization, AOU. So what is apparent oxygen utilization? It is nothing but the saturated component of the oxygen. What that means, at a given potential temperature and salinity, the water has certain potential to have a value of oxygen. You subtract it with what is observed. That is what called the apparent oxygen utilization. Okay. So note that the apparent oxygen utilization, however, does not include the effect of remineralization, because this is compared with respect to the saturated amount of oxygen. That is not the true oxygen. The remineralized oxygen, however, you get by the in situ oxygen subtracted by the oxygen preformed. Okay. So preformed oxygen, where can you get? You make the measurement of the surface ocean of the water, and that give you the preformed oxygen concentration, because that is the oxygen never taken part in any organic any formation or the remineralization. But the observed concentration in the interior of the ocean, however, will be the net effect of the remineralization as well as the whatever oxygen arrived at that depth and location after the subduction process of the water mass. Okay, so these are the basic concepts to introduce. So now if you look at the oxygen distribution in the global ocean is shown as a single panel plot in the left hand side of this map. What is it illustrating? Actually, this is a depth section, depth and latitude section. Okay, so it has multiple times the latitudes are repeating. I'll help you to understand. 60° north to 30° north to equator, again 30° south to 60° south. So this is the extent of the Atlantic Ocean in the left hand side. In the center is the Southern Ocean, 60° south. Again, it's starting from 60° south, 30° south to equator to 30° north. That is the Pacific sector. So the Pacific Atlantic cross section of the oxygen distribution is what's shown here. You see that the color is reversed the axis. Okay, the dark color means low oxygenated water. The light color means high oxygenated water. So you see that high oxygenated waters are present mostly in the deep region of the Atlantic. You see that. And if you can trace back to the surface, that definitely coming as a preformed oxygen from the surface, where at the 630 to 60° belt in the North Atlantic, due to the atmospheric exchange of oxygen with the surface water, oxygen gets saturated there, and that water undergoes subduction processes and deep injection interior and travels to southward direction towards the equatorial region at a 300-meter depth. So this is a high oxygenated water you can see in the North Atlantic. But in the Pacific, what happens? Pacific is not as ventilated ocean as in the Atlantic, because Pacific is a highly stratified condition. More precipitation water available in the Pacific as compared to the Atlantic, right? So the Pacific is more stratified. So the replenishment of the oxygen is not as efficient in Pacific as in Atlantic. So due to which you can see the intermediate depths around 400 to 1000 meter depth, there is a dark color. What is that? Dark color means low concentration of the oxygen. But in the deep Pacific, the even higher concentration of oxygen is found. How? That is because it can be traced. Some oxygenated water can be traced to the Southern Ocean and some to the Atlantic Ocean. They supply the deep ocean oxygen in the Pacific Ocean. Now, the right panel shows the apparent oxygen utilization. What is that actually? The saturated value, which is a theoretical value we can calculate by considering the potential temperature and salinity. The saturated value of oxygen you can calculate. And if you subtract it with the observed values, this is what you get as apparent oxygen utilization. So you can see that the large utilization of the oxygen happens in the intermediate depth of the Pacific. Agree? For example, between 400 to 1200 meter or 2000 meter, you see a blob of dark color. That means large utilization of oxygen, and that is exactly where you have a deep remineralization occurring. So the between equator to 30° to 60° belt of the tropical, so of the both the Pacific Ocean, you have a large consumption of the oxygen due to remineralization processes. What the Atlantic, however, the apparent oxygen utilization is rather white in color. That means whatever being utilized, being replenished with the deep water formation or deep replenishing with the atmospheric supply. So this is very different situation between Atlantic and Pacific in terms of oxygen concentration. So why we discuss it here is that something fundamental about how the oxygen is distributed in the global ocean. How is it consumed or utilized, and how is it replenished with respect to time? So that is what we are understanding from this particular slide. Now, if you go back, how to trace the region where there is a oxygen is weak? One thing is that you can make the direct measurement of the oxygen, and then you can trace the concentration of oxygen and note it where there is oxygen concentration is less or more. But the low oxygen concentration always comes with a penalty. As I said, what happens if the bacteria consumes oxygens and the oxygen really run out and it's not doesn't get replenished, then that part of the ocean becomes anaerobic condition. That oxygen can, I mean, bacteria cannot survive on respiration based on oxygen itself. So they have to find some alternatives. That means the low oxygen condition is going to affect the existing stoichiometry of the region. What is stoichiometry? The ratio built between the basic macronutrients, say nitrate to phosphate to carbon to oxygen. So that ratio balance is going to get disturbed if the oxygen is running out. So that is what we are going to look at the next slide. So if you look at the deep ocean remineralization ratio or the stoichiometric ratio, this is the global mean picture. Okay, this is depth is shown in the left axis, and the remineralization ratio is shown in the right axis. So if you look at the NP ratio, it comes around 1:16. We already studied that nitrate to phosphate ratio is more or less 1:16, but carbon to phosphate ratio is much more varying according to the type of microorganisms, as well as according to the process under which the remineralization happening. The carbon to phosphorus ratio can be widely varying. So this is the last one is the oxygen to phosphorus ratio. They have this type of a mean structure. However, within the given uncertainty range, they bear a kind of a nearly constant ratio. For carbon to phosphorus ratio, how much? More or less based on 100, and then maybe plus or minus 10 to 15 uncertainty is there, right? So carbon to phosphate ratio, basically 117 carbon is kind of a mean for one amount of phosphate and 16 amount of nitrate in any biomass formation. So that's kind of a CP ratio, but CP ratio is kind of more varying than the NP ratio as we go deep in the ocean. And the last one shows the oxygen to phosphate ratio. Actually, it's a minus O2. Why minus O2? The oxygen is consumed, right, in the remineralization process, or in the photosynthesis process, oxygen is produced. So it is an inverse relation between oxygen and phosphate, or oxygen to carbon, or oxygen to nitrate. Okay, so now minus O2 to P ratio is also more or less constant up to a depth of 3000 meters. Then there are large uncertainty as you go interior of the ocean. Now the point here is that can we utilize this ratio among the various nutrients, either basically macronutrients, as a tracer to the study about the oxygen minima condition, or can we use that as a tracer to study about what happens when the oxygen runs out? So that's what we are going to look at in the subsequent slide. So there we are introducing a new tracer called N-star. So I'm going to introduce the concept of N-star here. So this plot basically shows nothing but the Redfield ratio curve. What is Redfield ratio curve? The scatter diagram between the observed concentrations of phosphate and nitrate. That is called the Redfield ratio curve. And you all know that they bear a constant ratio 1:16. That is the gray thick line shown here. Now, if you come to the intercept, however, the phosphate is still remaining for a given zero nutrient nitrate condition. That means there is an intercept built around 2.9 millimole per meter cube of phosphate is still remaining. That's why there's an x-intercept in this line. Now any line parallel to this line are called N-star lines. So what is N-star? It is an artificial tracer. We can build around N-star is equal to n minus 16 times P. Okay. If for an ideal condition, if there is 16 nitrate is available for one phosphate, what will happen? This N-star will become 0. That means N-star basically talks about how
Sir, your
the
voice is not
axis
clear,
will
sir.
hit the zero or origin here. So the N-star becomes 0 for an ideal condition of 1:16 N to P to N ratio, or for 16 nitrate and one phosphate is available in the water column, Forget about this intercept term. Okay, then what happens? 16 minus 16 into p is 1, n star becomes 0. So n star 0 means is an idealized condition. That means the perfect balance star is less than 0. That is the place where nitrate is less as compared to phosphate. As the nitrate runs out and the phosphate remains the same, then n star will become negative. So the right side of the this plot, or the gray thick line, is the place where n star is less than 0. So that is the place when there is a tendency of nitrate is running out. And what are the area above the this thick gray line? That is n star greater than 0. What happens there? Actually, phosphate is less than nitrate. Okay, so that's called n star. That can happen if a nitrate is more and more fixed by the cyanobacteria in the surface. Nitrate concentration can be in a more proportion that for a give than that of a given phosphorus concentration, right? So that's n star greater than 0. Now this axis in direction indicates the kind of processes involved. Say for example, if you travel along the red arrow in going to the bottom left corner of the plot, there that is the axis of photosynthesis. So what happens during photosynthesis? The nitrate decreases and phosphate also decreases. So that is the direction of the photosynthesis, and opposite of that is nitrification. That means you have to return the organic nutrient back to the inorganic form. So that process is called nitrification. So the nitrification will be the opposite arrow. The nitrification results built up of phosphate as well as built up of nitrate, right? That's why they're going parallel direction to the gray line, but they are in opposite. The arrows are heading opposite, right? As you go in the positive right side, positive top right side corner, that will be the direction of nitrification. The opposite will be the direction of photosynthesis. That is a normal process. If there is a perfect balance between photosynthesis and nitrification, so you do not have a problem with the other processes. What are the other processes? Suppose a process happens with a nitrate runs out as compared to phosphate, we call it denitrification. So that arrow will be something like towards the right side, bottom right side. That is shown in the red arrow here, which is the direction of denitrification. And opposite can also happen. That means n star can run positive in cases when there is extreme nitrogen fixation in the top of in the surface of the ocean. If there are more nitrogen fixation, then this n star can turn positive. So there are four regimes we can consider. There's the idealized scenario when n star is 0, and there is a scenario when n star is severely negative and n star is severely positive. So mostly the oxygen minimum condition will take you to the area of n star severely negative. Why? We are going to explain that in a while. Now this relation to make n star exactly 0, we have to add an intercept of 2.9. That is because in the short time scale, the nitrate runs out more quickly than phosphate. That's why we need to depend on an intercept. This basically is a linear relation, y is equal to mx plus c type of relation, right? So there is an intercept built in the system. Now let us study a little more about the quantity n star and see what does it mean. So this conservative tracer n star permit us to define, the stoichiometric ratio permits us to define a new tracer n star whose interior distribution is minus 16p plus 2.9 millimole per meter cube. In this discussion, today's discussion, the unit is taken as that. Now, the major areas of anoxic where water column denitrification is known to occur are in the thermocline of the Arabian Sea and eastern equatorial Pacific. I think you are already familiar with this particular point because we already illustrated using the oxygen concentration map at 200-meter depth. We saw that large anoxic condition in the North Indian Ocean, especially in Arabian Sea, as well as the eastern equatorial Pacific. Now, both areas belong to what are known as the shadow zones of the thermocline. Now there is a concept called shadow zone. So this is basically a physical oceanographic concept. What is a shadow zone? I'm going to illustrate in a while. Now the waters in these shadow zones are not directly ventilated from the outcrop. There's a new terms coming, outcrop. I will also illustrate what is outcrop of these density surfaces because there exists no direct pathway to them that permits conservation of potential vorticity. New terms are coming. I'm going to explain what does this really mean. So as a result, these shadow zones are ventilated only in a diffusive manner, not in a direct ventilation exposed manner with the atmosphere. So leading to relatively long resident times and a strong drawdown of the dissolved oxygen concentration. So these are certain points. Maybe we can read that again one more time. So the stoichiometric ratio permits us to define a new tracer n star whose interior distribution is affected by transport and denitrification. So n star is an indicator of denitrification. The formula of n star is n minus 16p plus 2.9 millimole per meter cube. Is the equation. Now the major areas of anoxia where water column denitrification is known to occur are in the thermocline of the Arabian Sea and eastern equatorial Pacific. So both areas belong to what are known as the shadow zones of the thermocline. The waters in these shadow zones are not directly ventilated from the outcrop of these density surfaces because there exists no direct pathway to them that permits conservation of potential vorticity. So as a result, these shadow zones are ventilated only in a diffusive manner, not as an outcrop manner, leading to relatively long residence time and a strong drawdown of the dissolved oxygen concentration. So to illustrate that, I have to draw this schematic. So what happens in a major subtropical gyre in the ocean? So let us consider a major subtropical gyre, say in the North Pacific. So what you all know probably what is a gyre. Gyre is a large circulation pattern in the ocean with with the eastern broad eastern boundary current and a narrow western boundary current, and eastward flowing current in the north and southward flowing current in the south. So this is a closed circulation loop. Usually you find in the tropics. The reason for is that the wind stress forcing in the tropical area or close to the equator, you have trade wind forcing, and north of the equator around 30-40 degree north, you have a westerlies. Due to this consistent wind stress curl forcing, you will have a gyre circulation with a high sea surface or thermocline depth or sea surface height at the center and low aloft. Okay, this is called the gyre circulation. Now, why this gyre circulation is built is situated, I mean formed in this manner here. For the line shown here can be assumed as stream function. So I purposefully drawn very broad string function in space in the eastern side of the basin as compared to very closely packed stream functions in the western side of the basin. Why? To indicate that there is a strong western boundary current and a weak and broad eastern boundary current. Now what happens is that this is actually built due to the conservation of potential vorticity. Actually, the planetary vorticity of the system decreases as you come closer and closer to the equator. So the vorticity has to be conserved by this manner as a broad assumption. As a barotropic fluid, if you consider it, this pi becomes theta plus f by d. This is the potential vorticity. Now if you are assuming d as a constant and f is decreasing with the equator, as the flow comes more and more closer to the equator, f decreases. So relative vorticity has to pick up, and due to this pickup of relative vorticity, it has to steer away from this boundary and go to the west. That means the water trapped in this particular corner of the gyre has no way to communicating with the rest of the gyre, because the water intentionally steering away by respecting the potential vorticity balance, and due to which this area of the colored area of the ocean becomes kind of isolated. Now think about, this is the scenario happening from surface to 1,000-meter depth, such a deep gyre structure. So this is entire part of this column of water has no way interaction with the gyre. So there is no deep mixing or water mass formation within the zone either, because this is trapped in the tropical region. Therefore, this interior water of this area has no way replenishing any type of tracer, say especially for example oxygen. So how the oxygen is replenished in the ocean? Basically oxygen is replenished in the ocean through the surface ventilation. Okay, so you need to have, maybe I have a schematic of that here. So how the ocean is ventilated and replenished by oxygen. This is the schematic. So I'm sorry, the diagram is a bit poor, but still it has some essential component in it. Suppose this is the equatorial region, and this is the depth of 4 kilometer or the 4,000 meter depth, and this is the right side represents around 50 to 70 degree north. So what happens is that at the colder temperature, the gas dissolubility is extremely high. Gases dissolves more at colder temperature because of the partial pressure difference between the atmosphere and the ocean. And because of that, more and more oxygen get dissolves in the north, and that we also north we have a very deep mixed layer, and the oxygen get very saturated in the upper ocean. And due to the subduction processes or deep water mass formation processes, this preformed oxygen or whatever desaturated oxygen get subducted and travels towards the interior of the ocean. So this is the replenishing pathway of oxygen gas in the ocean. Now, the other areas of the tropical Pacific, say for example, which are under this gyre action, there are chances get water subducting in the northern latitude around 40 to 50 degree latitude, where mode water formation are there. They can replenish some of the oxygen and get circulate within the interior. That is why you are getting a good amount of oxygen in this particular yellow and green region where my mouse pointer is moving, because there is a chance that oxygen get transported and ventilated and within the interior of the ocean. But what happens is that in this part, neither a water mass formation and subduction happens, nor there is a chance for ventilation. So that becomes kind of a shadow zone where there are low oxygen water is trapped for a very longer amount of time. And that's why there is a typical shape of low oxygenated water in this type of shape. So you can apply the same principle in the southern gyre, and in the fortunately in the Indian Ocean southern hemisphere there is no much trapping, most likely due to the supply from the Pacific can help here. And in the Atlantic, there are weak low oxygen waters, but not as intense as in the Pacific. Maybe Atlantic also has a deep ventilation water coming from the North Atlantic and supplying into the interior, so that also can help the replenishing of deep Atlantic oxygen. But Pacific is particularly, the shadow zone traps a lot of water here with the low ventilated. Now, only way of replenishing oxygen here is through the horizontal diffusion, interior diffusion, and diffusive processes are far lower magnitude as compared to advective and ventilation processes. So due to that reason, this region exists as a low oxygen water region in the global ocean. Now, what happens in the Indian Ocean? We do not have a consistent gyre structure in the North Indian Ocean. Maybe you are studying general circulation in the other lectures. What they teach you, due to the reversal of monsoonal winds, there is no particular gyre structure in the Indian Ocean. There are coastal currents, they itself reverse according to the season. There are upwelling, and there are cross equatorial cells, etc. So altogether, there in the Arabian Sea also happens that in the deep 200 to 800-meter ocean, the ventilation of water with the atmosphere is rather limited, because it's basically tropical ocean, high precipitation ocean, so it's a highly stratified condition. The only areas where subduction happens is in the southern part of the tropical Indian Ocean, as well as in the Arabian Sea, where there is a Arabian Sea high salinity water mass region, but they cannot replenish as much as the demand of oxygen arise in this situation. So that's why we have a low oxygen water in the Arabian Sea also. Now, what we are trying to say is that the N star is an indicator of denitrification, which actually related with the high anoxic water condition in the ocean, and that basically trapped in the shadow zone. So I was trying to explain what is a shadow zone. So shadow zones of the oceanic region are piled up with the low oxygenated water. That is, I think we are now able to explain why low oxygen water is kind of trapped in this kind of area. Now, if you look, let us look at the N star profile of the global ocean. So N star, I told you already, the more negative value of N star means nitrogen running out or nitrate running out. That means the denitrification situation. Now, if you look at the N star at a depth of 200-meter, obviously you will see large denitrifications are happening in the coast of North American and the South American continent, in the Pacific Ocean, as well as in the Arabian Sea. Bay of Bengal is less as compared to the Arabian Sea in denitrification. Now, if you plot the vertical section of this N star profile, or N-star tracer, which is what shown here. The left side shows the vertical structure of N-star in the Pacific, and the right side shows the vertical structure of N-star in the Arabian Sea. You can see that there is a deep, intense less nitrate condition as you go from 200 to 400 to 600 meter. So that is the area where the anaerobic respirations are most common. Oxygen also very less. That is what we proved here. And because of that, nitrate runs out because bacteria uses now nitrate as the oxidant. Now this is the same picture, but shown in the black and white color. Here you see that the oxygen at what is shown here is oxygen at oxygen minimum. What is a minimum of the oxygen in a given column of water? So it's at extremely low oxygen condition of 10 to 5 micromole per meter cube water in the North Arabian Sea as well as in the Eastern tropical Pacific. That is what is. But what is marked in the red color is white. That means it has extremely high oxygen. This is the same subduction process I was explaining a while ago. The same process. Okay. Now going ahead, if you look at the N-star on the global ocean, not just the Arabian Sea, I was also showing the global ocean, but now if you look at in a more complete manner of the picture at a isopycnal along 26.5, if you look at N-star, then you see that N-star, the low N-star means these are negative, okay, negatively low N-star. That's what the meaning. Okay, high intensity N-star are located in these kind of pockets where the shadow zone also coexisting with it, and North Arabian Sea is one typical example as well. Now, if you go further, so we all talked about how the nitrogen is lost during anoxic condition. This is the reason. I think I was explaining this earlier also. So the transformation pathways from organic nitrate to inorganic nitrate contains the nitrate assimilation, ammonification, ammonium oxidation, nitrification, and nitrite oxidation. So this is the channel through which a regular channel of returning nitrate from inorganic form to organic to inorganic. But in the absence of oxygen, what happens? This nitrate is attacked by bacteria for respiration. So that will eventually turn from nitrate to nitrite. So whenever there is a nitrate concentration is larger in the ocean, that is also an indicator you have a strong denitrification happening. So we can, therefore we can look in the Arabian Sea also whether it has any high concentration of the nitrate in the Arabian Sea. Now the denitrification continues. One of the byproduct comes out of denitrification is nitrous oxide. I think you may be aware nitrous oxide is also a highly greenhouse warming potential gas which can emit. So in the papers of Benke et al., for example, in 2000, they have made a ship cruises in the Arabian Sea and measured the concentration of the nitrous oxide boundary of the Indian Peninsula has larger concentration of N2O, which is meaning that the efflux of N2O gas from those areas in the summer season is larger. Why is it? Because during summer season, our Eastern Arabian Sea, continental Arabian Sea also experience upwelling. So upwelling brings the more low oxygenated water to the surface, more stress for the bacteria to perform more denitrification and brings more nitrous oxide, and nitrous oxide get released to the atmosphere. So the flux of nitrous oxide can be measured by ship observations using ship observations, and can be assessed the nitrous oxide emission. So nitrous oxide is one of the byproduct of this denitrification reaction. So it doesn't stop there. The nitrous oxide further converts into nitrogen. So, and this nitrogen is bio-unavailable. It has to be fixed to the bioavailable form by cyanobacteria, for example. So the various processes involved are the denitrification, anamox, and etc. You can understand here. Now, so the point is that during the low oxygen condition, the nitrate will be utilized by bacteria as a major oxidant and produce their energy or their respire, due to which it reduce from nitrate to nitrite, and nitrite that further goes give way to nitrous oxide in this particular pathway. So that is what we have to understand. Now, so if you check the oceanic nitrogen budget, we have few points to talk about. So in order to put in perspective the input of fixed nitrogen into the ocean by a pelagic nitrogen fixation, the other source terms of the oceanic nitrogen budget need to be considered. So what are the other sources? Input of organic nitrogen from rivers, for in such as dissolved organic nitrate and first particular organic nitrate, for a total of about 80 teragram nitrate per year is coming as river input. Okay, so the atmospheric deposition of organic forms of nitrogen is another 50 teragram nitrate per year. So there are total around 130 teragram nitrate per year is replenished by the riverine input as well as the atmospheric deposition. So together with the pelagic and benthic nitrogen fixation, who fix the nitrogen? The cyanobacteria available in the surface of the ocean can fix the nitrogen. So this brings a total input of fixed nitrogen around 265 plus or minus 55 teragram nitrate per year. So 130 comes from the river, and if you subtract 130 with 260, it comes around another 130. So 130 is actually fixed by the nitrogen fixation in the surface ocean. So this is a total kind of a nitrogen budget, but this is a global total. Okay, this is, and this has large uncertainty. This estimate, say for example, it has a plus or minus 55 teragram. That uncertainty is so huge. So if we adapt the total fixed nitrogen loss tabulated by say Gruber in 2004, we arrive at a nearly balanced ocean nitrogen cycle for the present day ocean. However, admittably with the large uncertainty. So these kind of estimates are still having large uncertainties. That's why we need more nitrate measurements and nitrite measurements from the Arabian Sea to find out what is the ongoing status of denitrification. Because as we see, the global warming expands and increases, what happens is that the surface ocean becomes more and more stratified. If the surface ocean becomes more and more stratified, this type of ventilation and subduction processes will get arrested, will get more and more reduced. That means the chances of replenishing the oxygen in the interior of the ocean becomes very difficult, and because of that, more and more expansions of the oxygen minima zone can happen. This is what in recent research says the northern Arabian Sea oxygen minimum water volume is expanding due to climate change. Okay, there are papers published recently about that also, and what are the reasons why it is expanding, etc. So otherwise the supply of oxygen for the Indian Ocean should be from the southern part, where it has to, due to the cross equatorial cell, and then brings water to the north. Okay, so now what happens if the global warming affects the ventilation as well as the circulation changes, the replenishing of oxygen in the interior becomes difficult. So that is why we need to make more measurements and study on the Arabian Sea denitrification conditions. And recently we have attempted a similar study. That's the result I will highlight here. So this I already discussed. Now let us see some climatological map, or these are not very accurate. Okay, some tentative measurements are available, and based on that we can make this kind of maps. That in the Atlantic, this is the buildup of nitrous oxide, and mostly they focused around the equatorial area, or in the tropical area 10 south to 10 north. You see the large nitrous oxide concentration at a depth of 200 to 800 meter. You can, this is the nitrous oxide in micromole per meter cube in the Atlantic Ocean. In the Pacific, you see large nitrous oxide emission and a potential water in 20 south to 10° north at a depth of 200 to 800 meter. You can see within this ellipse the nitrous oxide measurements in the Eastern Pacific Ocean. So this Eastern Pacific from 60 south to 10 north. So in the Eastern Pacific, maybe around 210 or 220 latitude. So you see that large, and where is this actually coming? It is exactly matching the place you have this low N star. Low N star means the nitrate runs out. That's why you have a production of nitrous oxide, right? That definitely matches with the location there we're identifying. So that is the nitrous oxide production from the Atlantic. Similar maps for the Indian Ocean also available, but I did not include here. Especially the cruise observation from the Arabian Sea has mapped already the amount of nitrous oxide production seasonally, January 4 season. What are the major areas and quantities of nitrous oxide production in the Arabian Sea? Now this is Eastern Pacific. Let's go ahead. So what we have done is that we also have to monitor what happens about the denitrification in the Arabian Sea. So we have the chance of getting some ship-based data collected by CMLR in 2009, and they have done some springtime cruises, I guess around April, May or something. Around that time they have made several cruises, and they occupied these many stations. And the gray line, I mean the curved line shown here is nothing but the area of low oxygenated water marked by NACVI's early research. And it is illustrating that the most of the cruises occupied a low oxygen condition areas of the Arabian Sea. So looking at the nitrate, phosphate, oxygen profiles of these areas will give us a clue in the actually the recent estimate of the denitrification in year 2009, because they already have estimated around 15 to 20 teragram nitrate per year as denitrification in this area. But recently we had a chance to look at how in the recent data how the denitrification process happens. And the problem is that the large uncertainty in the results, that is the problem with the estimate of the denitrification. Anyway, so there are several cruises. These numbers represents the station number occupied by the ship during the spring season of 2009. So I already illustrated that the World Ocean Atlas says that the Arabian Sea is one of the hotspot of the low N-star water. So this is just to give an idea that the cruise observations were matching up with the areas where their low N-stars are found, and then we can look at the direct measurements of nitrite, oxygen, apparent oxygen utilization, nitrite, etc., to see the intensity of denitrification, and we can quantify also. So what we have done is that we took this observation, we calculated around 25.3 plus or minus 7 teragram nitrate per year denitrification occurring in this particular area. So this is consistent with earlier estimates. Some are estimated with a large uncertainty, some are with a meager uncertainty, but we notice there is not a drastic change in the denitrification in the direct measurement. They are kind of a consistent, or maybe the any trend of what we need to retrieve is maybe within the uncertainty. So they are unable to depict any kind of trend from the past estimate. So this is kind of a amount 25.3 plus or minus 7 teragram nitrate per year is the kind of estimate we arrived. So these are the various profile by the ship observation. So you can see that in the box average of all the panel here, the box average of all of them are shown here. You can see that the nitrate is that there is a consistent increase in the nitrate up to 200 meter, and then there is a decline of nitrate from 200 to 400 meter, and then again increases. So in all the boxes, if you look at C1, C2, C, I think all these there are 1, 2, 3 panels, so they may be representing these 3 boxes or something like that. I don't remember exactly. So anyway, you can see that in all the ship measurements, you see that nitrate profile shows a decrease with respect to 400 to 800 meter depth, and or 400 to 600 meter depth. Now that is consistent in all the ship measurements, and accordingly, if you see that the corresponding nitrite NO2 is that there is a increase. So that means I already told you the presence of nitrate is indicating the channel of denitrification. If you look at the transformation pathway of the nitrogen cycle in the oceans, the nitrate become nitrite is the first channel for the denitrification process. So you can see that the presence of nitrite is more and more available between 200 to kind of 800 meter depth, especially speaking around 500 to 400 to 500 meters. So there's a large amount of NO2 you can see in this region. And if you look at the dissolved oxygen, you see extremely low oxygenated water condition in the North Arabian Sea. And if you plot the N-star profiles of each of the cruise observations, you can see large negative N-star built around from starting from 150 200 meter all the way up to 800 meters. So this is actually indicating, and this is the individual cruise, and right panel shows the uncertainty from all the cruise observations is that there's a consistent pattern of negative N-star captured by the direct measurement. So it's showing that the high denitrification is still is ongoing in the deep of the Arabian Sea. So this is I mean, if you have more direct observations, and it's also important to quantify how much the denitrification activity going on in the Arabian Sea. Now, if you look at the another consequence of the denitrification is that you will have a low nitrate for a given amount of phosphate. So that means if you plot the depth-wise distribution of the stoichiometry or the Redfield ratio, that means 0 to 100 meter, 100 to 200 meter, 200 to 500 meter, and 500 to 1000 meter, represented as different colors like red, green, blue, and yellow respectively. And you can see that the ship observation shows the green line shows here is the theoretical stoichiometry of sorry, that is a trend line, I guess. So anyway, you can see that the expected stoichiometry is okay in the shallower water up to 100 meter, but if you go from 200 to 500 meter or 500 meter or above, your stoichiometry totally changes. That means you have excess amount of phosphate as compared to nitrate. Why? Because nitrate is consumed by the bacteria in the denitrification process. So this actually modifies the stoichiometry. The denitrification in the Arabian Sea modify the stoichiometry of the Arabian Sea water. So that is one important aspect of this denitrification. So you can see that in the deep water, you have larger phosphate as compared to nitrate. So phosphate concentration increases for a given amount of nitrate concentration, which slope is also different. The slope kind of tells you what is the modified Redfield ratio as you go deep from 200 to 500 or 1000-meter depth. Now, if you look at the denitrification amount for all the station from 2, 3, 4, 5, these are station number, okay? They are kind of more or less agreeing each other, except in some station reported kind of a 40 teragram nitrate per year. Rather, some station reported as close to, or most of the station reported as close to around 20 teragram nitrate per year denitrification. So that is kind of consistent among all the stations, and except very few stations reporting a very high number. So this is a recent work and shows the intensity of denitrification as measured by the direct ship measurement. So now I think it's a good time to conclude, because we discussed a good data about how the oxygen limiting condition happens, how the oxygen limitation is sustained in the ocean due to the physical general circulation of the ocean and oxygen replenishment, denitrification, instar, etc. we discussed. So I conclude here, so that the Arabian Sea is one of a strong denitrification area. Various studies also suggest that, and we need more measurements to make to monitor the ongoing expansion of oxygen minima and denitrification in the Arabian Sea. So I think I now conclude my lecture here. So it's also about my time is up. So if I have any doubt, I can take a couple of questions. Thank you.
Any specific questions to Dr. Vinu, please? Okay, I don't see any questions in the chat box also. So thank you, Dr. Vinu, for your wonderful lectures. And if in case we receive any questions offline from any of the participants also, we'd like to pass it on to you. Sure. So that even during the brainstorming also, if some doubts arise or something that can be cleared on that particular day.
Yeah, sure. I'll share the PPT with you. Maybe yesterday's I did not share yet. Yesterday's and today's I'll share. You can share with the participants. There's no problem. So sure. I can take questions offline. Yeah.
Sure, sure.
Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you for joining all these 3 days to listen to the story of biogeochemistry of Arabian Sea. I hope you understood something new. And I know the audience is quite diverse in their experience and their expertise. So hope you will remember about this particular region of the Indian Ocean and the basic behavior of the biogeochemistry, and hope you will make use of it in some of your you will have chance to make use of it in your career sometimes in the future. Thank you everyone again for joining and participating in my lectures. Thank you, Uday, for this lecture series. Yeah.